the Dread Pirate Roberts takes no prisoners. So that leads us into chapter 2, where we meet the prince, and I've gone over my time already for what I wanted to talk about in terms of review. So let's move on to chapter 3, and more specifically chapter 4 for today. Because again, chapter 2.
Well, before you start, I'll
Yeah.
say this. I finally caught
Oh, you dropped out.
and Love Works.
Sorry, you dropped out.
Hear me?
No, I can
Hear me?
now, yes. But I didn't hear what you said earlier.
Okay. I said I finally figured out how Count Rugen was explaining marriage and love. It kind of took me a while to figure out how he's actually wording it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to say that, now continue.
Oh, okay. So again, real quickly, chapter 2, we just go ahead and meet Prince Humperdinck. And I have some notes that I want to cover with you today, and let's just get into it. Okay, so I'm going to mute my camera, but you should still be able to hear my voice as I share this material with you. Okay, so let's go to slideshow from the beginning, please. Again, one of the most important things about chapter 3, and this is kind of partially review and partially what I wanted to do in terms of discuss this material with you on Monday, was that chapter 3 is really missing from the film adaptation. There's very little mention of any of the content from this portion of the book. So I ask, is this a significant chapter if it gets completely cut out of the famous film version? Well, I think it is, because for one thing, we're introduced to Humperdinck's family. And he gathers a sort of council of advisors. And we talked about these characters last time in minute detail, but I want to dig a little bit deeper into them. The council, of course, is comprised of Count Rugen, his best friend or right-hand man, man-at-arms, as they would say, his father, King Lotharin, and his stepmother, Queen Bella.
Your mic's going crazy again.
Uh-oh. Is that any better?
Yeah, should be.
Okay. So, again, we also get the first mention of Miracle Max. So we have King Humperdinck's council, Count Rugen, King Lotharin, and Queen Bella. And this is unique because we're actually led to believe that, for all intents and purposes, Prince Humperdinck seems like a regular person. He's got a family, he has good friends, so he's not a simple two-dimensional villain. He actually has some thoughts and some feelings. And one of the most unique feelings is that he calls his stepmother, Queen Bella, E.S., which is short for evil stepmother. But as we said last time, we really don't know that she's evil per se, and it's only his word that makes her, or sort of that we have to take in account in determining that she's evil. So I ask you a question. Do you think Queen Bella is evil? And do evil stepmothers produce evil children? What do you think about this? Is Queen Bella evil?
I would. Ooh. Go ahead, Devin.
I'm still thinking about what I'm going to say.
I got you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah.
Well, I would say this here, that I don't think just because you're an evil step person or mother, father, that you produce evil children. It could be just the very opposite. You could be a good parent and have an evil child. I know this may be out of the ballpark of what we're reading on, but I mean, I just base it on, look at two heterosexuals and how they produce a homosexual child. Explain that one. So I know, no, you could produce a good child as well, even if you are evil. You know,
Yeah, that's a good point. Nature versus nurture, you know?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that was a good thought.
Yeah.
well, I say that based on, we say homosexual. I mean, I'm not opposed to homosexuality, whatever people do, but I'm saying they come from two straight parents supposedly, yet they came out this way. So maybe if two homosexuals had a straight child, it would come out. I don't know. I just know something's not right with the way we think or been taught to believe.
Yeah, it's
We need some
complicated.
really good thinkers in this world.
Yeah, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I think if I can understand, if I can interpret what you're suggesting, it's very difficult to take something like a person's personality and contribute it entirely to either genetics, or attribute it entirely to the conditions under which they were raised, right? As you suggested,
Sure.
if you had two people who were in a same-sex marriage and they either adopted a kid or they had a child from a previous marriage, well, then there's no bearing on on what that child's sexual preference or orientation would be. That probably has nothing to do with the process. By the same token, you could have two straight or two parents who identify as, I'm not as familiar with all the new terminology, but like sort of, I guess, cisgen or whatever. And so they're like, all right, they're just what we would perhaps think of as a very atypical couple. But then they could still have a child who ends up leading an alternative lifestyle, or who ends up in a homosexual relationship. I've had friends.
What about
Well, just
Yeah.
1 minute. I have a very good friend who who identifies as gay, and both of his parents were straight. Many of his brothers are what would be called, straight or whatnot, but that had no bearing on his, development. So the point that I think you wanted to get to is this idea of nature versus nurture. And I think the fact that Prince Humperdinck is kind of a hunter and kind of a verbose person does not necessarily reflect on Queen Bella and her job as an effective parent. Now, I stepped over what you were going to say for a moment there, Sonia. What else did you have to add?
No, but you're right.
Hey,
the
interesting
nature
comment in
versus-
chat.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So I continue.
One
moment. Go ahead, Sonia.
But it's what you said, nature versus nurture. That's where this is really going. So I think you're right. I just want to let you know you're right. You filled in the blanks.
Okay, very good. I did have another comment in the chat. Caitlin suggests that she thinks that she may be evil, that Queen Bella actually may be evil, and that her treatment of Humperdinck may have caused him to project his negative feelings toward her for so long that this is really interesting, that the negativity he has developed towards her grew to include all women, which is why he has trouble finding a wife based on more traditional ideas of love. Wow, that is a really good comment or a good thought. I hadn't considered that before. The only thing, I'll ask two questions. This encourages me to ask two distinct questions. Number one, does anybody else agree that maybe the way in which Queen Bella treats her stepson may have influenced his attitude toward other women? And number two, is there any textual evidence for that? Is there anywhere in the book that we could point to that might suggest this is the case? Because this is a very interesting premise.
I agree with that.
For number two, oh, sorry, go in.
No, finish.
For number two, I say that it's not directed to Humperdinck, but maybe towards Buttercup and how she was raised. She was around a family that was like constantly arguing and planning on divorce, and it was always one trying to overpower another. So, and then later on, Bella, and how like she just wanted to just try to overpower him.
Okay. We could have some
It's
evidence.
just that aura just came, an aura of conflicting arguments. Like, okay, this is how a relationship's supposed to work, and she didn't know any better.
That's interesting. That's very interesting because there may not be direct evidence in regard to Queen Bella and her action, but there's a sense in the atmosphere, so to speak. If you look at Buttercup's parents, that the author has some meta commentary going on about the nature and relationships of couples and how it's difficult and how more often than not relationships end up failing. So that's an interesting piece of evidence that maybe there's not direct textual evidence that, or maybe I just didn't pick up on it, but there is meta-textual evidence that that's something implied. This could be a potential paper topic. This is a good idea. So Caitlin, I have to give you your kudos that you might be onto a theme or an idea that's worth pursuing for a longer or a larger scale paper later this semester.
Oh, Kaylin, don't.
Yeah.
You're
Any other
giving
thoughts?
us work.
To add to the first question you asked,
Sure.
I don't think that Queen Bella in particular has been given enough of kind of a background for the reader to really predict if she's fully evil, because again it's mostly from the prince's perspective and him saying she was mean or whatever, but that could just be his perception of a new person coming in to replace his actual mother or whatever.
Yeah.
So that could also be where he's got a little bit of bias against not an intruder, but just kind of an outsider.
Mm-hmm. And we know from historically that there's some context for that as well, because we talked last time about the fact that there was so much how should I say this? There were so many relationships or closely knit relationships amongst the hierarchy of medieval royalty that they actually even developed physiological and mental concerns because of the blood pool was too small or too restricted. So you even had phenomenon like blue blood, where the veins would course in a certain way so frequently that there would actually be a slight hue or blue tinge to the skin of royalty. So yeah, there's a suggestion that there's good evidence to suggest that Humperdinck may be a little bit afraid of any kind of outside influence impacting his kingdom or threatening his position. I think that's a good point to bring up, Lucas.
But isn't that true? Isn't that true today, Mr. Fowler, with the British royal family and how they marry within, and that look that's within the family, how it hasn't gone anywhere, and they say they marry because of wealth and all of that, that they don't really want outsiders within the family. They want to keep everything within the British royal family.
That's absolutely true. If I'm struggling with the young lady's name. You're gonna have to forgive me. I don't.
Princess Diana?
Yes, but
You mean Diana?
yeah. I mean, I was actually thinking a little bit more about the young lady who just married. Is it Harry? Prince Harry?
Meghan Markle.
Meghan Markle.
Yeah,
Well, the reason I say Diana because Diana
ahead.
was the original. Her family is the original kings and queens of England, even before Elizabeth's family came in there. So they just married. Really, her family is the originals. She's related to Winston Churchill and all of these people, even further down the line. And the Queen's people are more newer in the country as opposed to Diana.
32.
Yeah. That's a good point. Diana would challenge a lot of the more conservative ideologies that the British monarchy had invested themselves in publicly. So you're right. I think that's a good point. And now there's even I think Megan, is it Megan? What's her last name? Can anybody help me out?
Markle. Don't
Markle,
ask me,
yes.
just go by Megan. I'm like you, I don't really know her either. I don't know her either.
But young Meghan Markle, she's American, and I think that's really sent a lot of ripples through the royal family because she has a very distinct and a very American perspective on things that I don't know that they were necessarily prepared for. So that's raised, I know, some eyebrows over the pond in that area. Real quickly,
So what did we history? Go right ahead.
what was that?
Mm-hmm.
No, go. Finish what you were gonna say.
Oh, I was just to say, Devin had a question. What's up, Devin?
I had something to add to question one. Repeat what it was again, because so I can get my words straight.
Sure. The first question here was, does Queen Bella's intentions make her relationship with her son tenuous to the point that he rejects women, or that he has a problem with all women because he has an initial issue with her?
There's this show that recently came out about how two people, how it's like, a queen and king are coming together to, for the lands of London. I don't know the name of the show, but I just know how one of the trailers. And the thing is, it's like the prince or king, however you want to look at it, is constantly kind of belittling her because, at the time, women weren't as high praise. Like,
Mm-hmm.
a women into power and stuff like that is something completely unheard of. So my thing is this: we don't know much about how Queen Belle really comes around to be this evil person, but my guess is she probably has her own motives of, like, trying to get into power and actually being noticed. The whole thing about a tragic villain, she may be that same thing as well.
But Devin, could that be a way also that women could exercise any form of authority is by being manipulative and underhanded? Is like publicly they couldn't do anything, but the best way they could do it was to manipulate, like in how she understood what the king would say, and that gave them power.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, with the thought of, women not being highly praised and, Queen Belle is trying to be manipulative, would that probably be saying that that the son was probably just raised off these old traditions of women not being high praised, and thereby not have a good outlook on Queen Belle?
That's a great question. I don't have an immediate answer. And as I'm typing in, this would be a really good potential paper topic that you could explore.
Devin.
Do women have to exercise their power in ways that we might see as tricky or perhaps even devious because of the low status or the kind of sexual
am a
politics that
dangerous
went on at the
person.
time. I don't know.
I would think so because they have no form of power. If you weren't a queen of Egypt, it wasn't going to work. If you weren't from one of those Mideastern countries, it just wasn't going to work. And that was even limited for a certain amount of time. So, no.
That's a very good point. And, of course, the ways that women had, or the methods women had available to them to exercise power or to exercise influence were very much tied to their ideas of how they could influence, or if you want to think of it in another way, manipulate their husbands and the men in their lives. So that's a very good point. I'm going to get back to the presentation for just a second here. So we're going to move ahead. We've had some good questions that we've raised here. Interesting side note about Queen Bella. She does wield some significant power because, again, just as a point of review, only she correctly interprets the will of the king. She's the only one who can make out what he says. At one point, the king offers his son, Humperdinck, a platitude because he says he's a thunderously handsome prince and any princess would be happy to have him. She doesn't interpret that or misinterpret it, though. And then Humperdinck returns his compliment to his father when Queen Bella reveals that the original Miracle Max has been fired, and we'll see Miracle Max later on in the novel. At the core of this courtship, we have this issue of Gilder and its neighbor Florin. Remember that if you live in Florin, you live along the Gilder Strait, right? If you live in if you live in Florin, you live along the Florin Strait. If you live in Gilder, you live along the Gilder Strait. And we have all of these little skirmishes that we're told about. The olive war, the tuna fish discrepancy, the Roman rift in which we're told they almost both go bankrupt, and then the discord of the emeralds where they team up to rob everyone around them, in which they build their fortunes back together. A lot of ridiculousness going on here with this piece of material. But the key is that as Prince of Florin, his marriage to to Norina, Princess Norina rather, could bring peace between the two countries. And that essentially their economies required them to battle one another to stay alive. When we get to the prospect of Norina, we again return to this tendency. Sometimes it's referred to as male gaze, but I think it goes a little bit out of bounds here because we have the queen and we have several other female characters that harness or focus a lot of attention on the physical. So we don't really learn much about Norina as a person, but what we do learn is that she has a very distinctive physical appearance. A rosous complexion, interestingly, one green eye and one blue eye, a traditional hourglass figure, marble-like skin, but specifically a great wardrobe with the largest hat collection in the world at that time. The only question
When you say
what's that?
When you say marbled skin, I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, what is the skin pigment disorder like Winnie Harlow has? You know what I'm talking about? Like it's like where you get like white and patches of like, you know, more pigmented like skin.
Albino?
No,
No.
it's like a condition where like you get like certain spots of your
I
skin.
know what you're talking about too.
Yeah,
Yeah, like there's a really famous model. Her name's like Winnie Harlow.
yeah. I don't know the name. I know what you're referring to, but I did a little research on this since Monday, and I think most of the time when someone refers to a person's skin as marbleish, I think it actually has more to do with the texture of their skin. So if you think of marble as being a polished stone or smooth,
Shiny.
or particularly smooth stone, I think it's about the quality of her skin, not necessarily a specific pigmentation. I think it's just that she has very nice skin.
Italigo.
Could it
Yeah.
be like when you see an artist do marble work and he makes it beautiful and perfected? That's what they're talking about. You know,
I
like
believe
when
you're
they
right,
put-
Sonia. I think that's
Right.
what the intention was. Mhm.
Right.
But then Devin came up with the other question for you, the answer to your question, Lucas. It was Vitaglio, is that right?
Someone else saying that in chat.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds
Yeah.
about right.
So there you go. That's the answer to the one. But I think I'm reading more along the lines of Sonia's definition. So she's more kind of like a statue, like she is really, really good, a physically attractive woman. And then we get, which I've,
Well, I say that when they
go for it, Sonia.
Continue.
describe certain women, they always say they're statuette.
Mm-hmm.
And generally that's a statue of someone that's been Michelangelo or the great artists, they sculpted. So that's what I'm going by.
Yeah, I think you're right on. After this point, we get what's referred to as the first major edit of chapter 3, where Goldman interrupts around 3.5 pages. And he describes there's a lot of packing and unpacking as Bella journeys from Gilder back to Florin. Then the two women meet. Oh, I said that incorrectly. Sorry. Let me backtrack for a moment. Queen Bella packs and goes from Florin to Gilder. The two women meet, and Norina accepts Queen Bella's invitation, and then it's time for Norina to do the same thing. She packs and travels and then goes back to Florin. Why even mention this? Is Goldman suggesting something about the nature of genre here? And I think he is. If you've ever had an occasion to read the Canterbury Tales, that is a story about a group of travelers, or pilgrims as they're called, who go from, I believe, England to the Holy Land to visit some of the famous religious shrines and sites found in that area. And there's a long retinue of characters. I think there are 13 characters. And at one point, it's proposed that they tell a story. And they tell one story on the way there, and then they tell one story on the way back. And I believe that there's some bit of a debate as to whether or not the author, Geoffrey Chaucer, actually intended to write 26 stories as part of the Canterbury Tales, but ran out of time, or if he ever only intended to write the story that he did write. There are some famous ones like The Miller's Tale, The Tale of the Wife of Bath, The Knight's Tale. But all of these characters are described, and all of the things that they carry with them on this voyage are also described in great detail. So I think that romance and high adventure stories continued some of these trends, and I feel like that's what's being mocked in this first edit that we see from Morgenstern. Any other ideas about why he would include this long comedic idea? I mean, he could just not tell us, as far as that goes. So why even bring that up?
I thought it might have been just to kind of reinforce the idea that like it's all about stories, like and like the different stories that like can be combined to make like, one story, even though like as a reader you're already reading a story,
Mhm.
but like it's all about stories, like different stories being like combined.
That's interesting. That's an interesting thought. Can you expand on that a little bit, or maybe throw us an example?
Kind of like how you said like about like him cutting back to like being kind of like the like omnipresent like narrator almost, where like you know that there's like a different story going on other than the one that like they're talking about, and then like the narrator himself is like kind of telling the story like through like just his description of everything.
The
Like
story within the story.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
Okay.
I don't know how to explain it that good. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. Because I understand what you mean. That there are all kinds of other parts or elements to a story, other voices, other perspectives that have to be marginalized in order to get to the key part of the story. And this is kind of an out there
Yeah,
example.
they're
But
kind
bear
of like
with me.
layers.
Yeah, but bear with me for just one moment. If you ever,
Like a filler.
yeah. So like if you've ever watched Star Wars, you don't panic just because I mentioned Star Wars. You don't have to be very aware of that storyline. But at the end of the first Star Wars movie, spoilers if you haven't seen it, everybody gets a medal except Chewbacca. Now, Chewbacca is an alien, and we can't really understand what he says. But one question that a lot of fans have always had is, why didn't Chewbacca get the medal? Like where is his medal? And there could be a story. You could retell the entire story of Star Wars from Chewbacca's perspective. And even though he is a major character, there's a lot about him that is left to question. And I think that's an example of what might be going on here. We don't really have as much time to focus on Chewbacca because that's not the central narrative of Star Wars. Moving back to our textual example, this might be, since Queen Bella and Princess Narina aren't going to stick around for very much longer in the book, they may
Give them
get
some sort of introduction, how they came to be.
Yeah, they may get sort of they may get ripped off a little bit here in terms of their perspective. That's a good point, Lucas. I'm going to go ahead and move along here.
Thank you.
Yeah. We get everybody together in Florin for a dinner party, and everything seems to be going well until we get to this crucial minute, the time between 8:23 and 8:24 p.m. And Goldman does a really good job. He breaks down a single minute of time over a span of 3 pages. And the big event is that right here on the precipice of potential peace, because they're eating outside, it gets a little gusty, kind of like the weather today. It's windy. And the wind blows Princess Narina's hat, one of her famous hats, off, and it is revealed that she has no hair. She's bald. And Humperdinck ends any hope of a courtship right then. He's like, I'm not going to be married to a bald woman. People will snicker behind me.
Hold on. Could you wait 1 second? Hey, Dan, can you mute your mic? I'm sorry, dog.
Yeah, sorry, train, my bad.
Yeah, right. Sometimes we can't plan on those trains. So yeah, the wind comes through, blows her hat off. It's revealed she's bald. And Prince Humperdinck says he's not going to have it. It's interesting only, and I want to just reflect on this for a minute. It's not so much that she's bald, but that he doesn't want to be married to a bald woman because people would snicker about him. He doesn't care what they might say about Narina. It's all about how her looks reflect on him. And I think that this is another interesting element of this text, because a lot of the text focuses on two thematic elements that keep coming up. The first one is the idea that a man's ego, not all men, but a man's ego, in this case, Prince Humperdinck's ego, is threatened by his perception. And he looks at women not necessarily as a partner. He looks at women not necessarily as a great love, but how they reflect on him. And that raises the stakes of the physical attributes of all of the women in this world, or in his circle of experience. And we know that that's probably not the best way to go about finding a mate, or finding someone that would develop into a true role.
I have a reputation to uphold here.
Right. It's all about his reputation more than it is about the women. That's very true, Devin. And now if you take those ideas and you contrast them to Wesley, who actually kind of challenges Buttercup to be more than just her looks allow her to be. That's an interesting juxtaposition between these two male leads, right? So in one sense, Wesley seems very pure, and Humperdinck seems very obviously the villain. But I think it's a little more complicated than that. Okay, those are just Mr. Fowler's thoughts. Maybe that inspires some ideas for a paper topic. I don't know. This is when Buttercup is brought into the picture. You know, the prince kind of announces that he just wants somebody who looks nice. And Count Rugen says, oh, if you just need looks, I've got the milkmaid for you. He says, she is a commoner, though.
GG easy.
Yeah, and she may not be able to hunt. But he says, well, okay, I want somebody so beautiful that when you see her, you say, wow, that Humperdinck must be some kind of fella to have a wife like that. So again, her beauty and her personality doesn't matter. It's about propping up his own fragile ego. I think that's interesting. And so he goes and he meets with Buttercup, and he says, I'm your king and you're supposed to marry me. And she says, I'm your servant and I respectfully decline. And he says, okay, well, you could die for no reason, or you could be the richest woman in the kingdom and give away turkeys at Christmas. And she says, it's not really about the money, or even about the fact that you're the king and I'm your servant. It's more about the fact that I don't do well in love. And at this idea, Humperdinck completely scoffs and he says, love, I don't want anything to do with love. I just need somebody to produce a male heir. And she says, well, okay, if you just need somebody to marry you and my alternative is death, well, what the heck? As long as I don't have to be in love with you, we might as well go ahead and get married. And then that takes us to chapter 4.
I get what he's trying to get his wording now.
Yeah, exactly. So in chapter 4, we have the
disgusting.
Yeah, the quick edit. We say that 72 pages of text are quickly cut down to about 3. So if you've ever read the book or ever heard of the book Delta Wedding, this is sort of an interesting juxtaposition, because all the planning and preparation and the aftermath of the wedding in that book, it's kind of comically set up so that the actual wedding itself is described in, like, I think a paragraph or maybe 2 sentences. The Princess Bride sort of flips the whole thing around in that none of the planning describing the buildup to the wedding itself is actually covered in the text. That's all cut out. but we do acquire some essential details from chapter 4. Because Buttercup is a commoner, we find out that she cannot technically marry the prince. So they make her the Princess of Hammersmith, which is a piece of land that King Lotharion had tacked on during some battle that no one remembers. Also, King Lotharion improves in terms of his health. And we are told that this is cut out because Morgenstern, the original author, hated doctors and preferred miracle men, which we can interpret as William Goldman perhaps not having the best not being on the best of terms with his own doctors. Buttercup trains in the ways of the aristocracy. That would have been interesting to me to find out about. But we're just told that she trains to be appropriate, and she learns about the courtly manners of the era. And last but not least, we also learn that 3 years pass while this entire process goes on. Now, I have an interesting question, and this is a little bit about Prince Humperdinck. And Caitlin says, doesn't anybody else think that Prince Humperdinck looks and acts like Lord Farquaad from Shrek? And, and Kevin and a couple of the rest of us.
I'm not the only one who saw it.
Yeah, we do agree a little bit. So to answer your question, Caitlin, yes, several of us, including Kevin and Devin, we see the connection here. And I think Lord Farquaad, especially in the Shrek animated versions, really does owe a debt of gratitude to two characters: Chris Sarandon's rendition of Prince Humperdinck in The Princess Bride, and of course his visual look is based on Laurence Olivier's Richard III. So if you've never seen those two films, or if you've never seen Richard III, all you have to do is look up an image on Google and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Okay.
The scoriness and no. That's
Go ahead, Sonia.
That's all right, sir, really.
Okay. So my last question, which we'll end on, is why would you cut this? Well, first of all, we know that Goldman really didn't cut it. But why then tell us that it was cut out? Is Goldman challenging a contemporary readership over their inability to absorb massive amounts of detail? That could be one answer. He could say that
would just draw it out.
Yeah, you don't have the patience, so I'm going to cut that for you. But I ask, is there something else going on? Is there something else going on about why he cut all of this out? Go ahead, Devin.
Time skip.
Okay, yeah. So why
we
do
don't
that?
really know. Saying there's gonna be probably like, you know, that they're gonna get married and things like that. You know, the preparations are gonna be coming into play. This, that, and the third. It's just kind of just drawing out pretty much what we kind of expect. Like probably the thing would be to leave it into probably how Buttercup will react to all this. That's probably the only reason why you probably would leave it in. But that's it.
Okay, all right. Maybe just to get Buttercup's reaction, and that again, is that as crucial to the telling of the story? That's debatable. Maybe it's not. Wasn't in his estimation. That's as good of a reason as any as I can think to cut it out. I've got one other theory, but I want to hear what you all have to say as well. And I'm going to type the question in just in case anybody missed it. Any other thoughts about why he might cut this?
I mean, I think
Mm,
Devin was on to something pretty good about the, just the patience part and just not really like thinking it was as important, just as like more of kind of like filler stuff and like background information that, yeah, it would be nice to know, but it's not necessarily like needed to like fully understand and like grasp what's going on, like that would just be more for entertainment. And it was really like, how long is it already?
Right. Okay. And
I guess
this,
the question. I guess the
right.
question he wants to know is: does Buttercup fall for the trap of, "Hey, I'm just gonna marry for royalty," or is she gonna try to actually break away from the system?
Okay. So I've got two really good points there. Let's unpack the first one. So Lucas suggests that maybe it is just an edit to save time or refocus the text on the most essential details. And again, I'm going to bring up my favorite word for this week, which is context. An audience reading this book would have been, just coming out of the Watergate era. They would have been very disenfranchised, very sort of, I think, disenfranchised with any idea about loyalty or, a ruling or elite class of people that are going to be trustworthy and be dependable in terms of, reliance on them to make the right decisions. I also think that a contemporary American audience may not have had as much of an interest in the habits and circumstance of royal uh, behavior. I'm trying to think of the term, but courtly manners.
I think they said aristocrats,
Right. They might not be interested in the lives of aristocrats and the details that inhabit their existence. So I can assume that maybe that this was a potentially cut for that reason. But going back to Devin's point, we also have this question of whether or not Goldman chooses to make or leave this material for us to question, because we don't get a sense of what mental space Buttercup is in while she's in the midst of learning all these things. Is she really going to sort of buckle down and accept this as her fate, or is she still hoping for some other development to come along in her life? That's a great
It's like
question.
a mini cliffhanger.
And a question I don't necessarily have that I can't answer.
Find out on the next chapter of The Princess Bride.
Yeah. I think there's a great question that he leaves for us as an audience to sort of fill in. So I think both of those interpretations are probably quite valid. Any other thoughts or ideas about this portion?
Sounds like a potential paper topic.
It does. It does sound like a good potential paper topic. I agree. Okay. Well, that's pretty much all I have for today's session. I've posted the PowerPoints that we went through to the class notes, so you can check those out on Desire to Learn. And your priority for this week should be to finish or revising your ad analysis paper. The next chapter, chapter 5, is a bit of a longer one. So I'm dividing it up. I'm going to ask you to read, let me see, the first section of chapter 5, which starts on page, if you have my edition anyway, it starts on page 89 and goes to page 110. So stop where it says Inigo. Stop right before Inigo, if you can handle that. I know a few of you may be compelled to read a little bit further. That's always okay. But for next Monday, I'm only going to talk about the first portion of the reading. So up to the chapter break entitled Inigo, where we meet Inigo Montoya, the second major hero of the piece. All right, that's it for me. Any last minute questions or concerns?
I'm still banking Wesley comes back.
Whoop, sorry, I got too much crosstalk. Go ahead, Sonia.
When you're done, I would like to talk to you
Absolutely.
in regards to the email.
Yes, and I'm prepared for that. Anything else?
No,
Still
I'm
banking
good for the
Wesley comes
day.
back.
Yeah. Wesley does make his return, so we'll quickly see what he's got to say.
But just
about all-
spoilers. I was just spoilers. I just made a suggestion.
Oh, well, we'll see how it goes. Okay, thanks so much for your time and interpretation or time and attention today. I will see the rest of you on Monday. And then Sonia, you and I are going to hang out for a little bit and talk about your paper. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and everyone have